Welcome to the final episode of our Cyberpunk Red series, everybody. This episode, we get into some fantastic discussion about the process. But before we get to the episode, here's what you could expect from our call to action.
After the episode, join us for an announcement of a sort of hiatus coming next month for us as a treat. Mm-hmm. Our patron thank yous and the normal episode closer stuff.
Yeah. Until then, enjoy our discussion of Cyberpunk Red, everybody.
Welcome back to our discussion episode. Last time we finished our session 0 for Cyberpunk Red. This episode we'll be discussing the character creation process. We are excited to welcome back Phil and Senda from Panda's Talking Games podcast. Can you reintroduce yourselves again for everyone and tell us a little bit about the characters you made?
Oh, me? Yeah, sure. Hi.
Senda's over here like waiting.
No, it's fine.
I'm
Phil Vecchione. I'm Phil Vecchione. I am all sorts of stuff. I am co-host with Senda on the Panda's Talking Games podcast. I am one of the co-hosts of the Misdirected Mark /MM Plays podcast, writer for Gnome Stew, game designer, publisher, that kind of stuff. So, and Forever GM. And my character that we created in previously is Gotcha, the Fixer. His real name's Kyle, but Gotcha is his handle. And Gotcha is as in, don't worry, I gotcha. Whatever you need, Gotcha will find for you. So as for the character, I used the most fiddly version of the character creation process. I did the full build and came out with just a few things that I think were a little different than if we had gone down one of the more planned routes. So I do have a high enough reflex and evasion to actually dodge bullets. So that was I thought that was a good survival skill to have, and sprinkled around some points in a couple places that we didn't like, that normally I wouldn't have gotten to pick up. So I have a little bit of gamble. Without a doubt, I have a ton of social skills and a reasonable amount of range weapon skills in the way of handgun. So if things go south, not only can I run from bullets, but I could send a few back. That's me, Senda.
Yeah, cool. Hi, I'm Senda, and I am the other co-host of Panda's Talking Games, and I also write for Gnome Stew. I have an archive of episodes of She's a Super Geek if you're into listening to actual play. Gosh, what else do I do these days? I think that's probably about it for the moment. And my character is Jules Meow Meow. She is I wrote rocker girl because the class is rocker boy, but whatever. She definitely is. She's her pronouns, so she's a rocker girl. And she is the one person band noise design. Or she's like the front person for the band noise design. I did the middling path for character creation, wherein I didn't have to make anywhere near as many decisions or choices. So I think the thing that I will just call out about Jules Meow Meow is that she grew up in like a pretty decent place, but she's definitely rebelling against her parents. So she's like definitely in a screw you, I don't want to live your comfy lifestyle that requires, bowing to the corporate hierarchy. She plays the guitar and sings. That is her band, Noise Design.
Amazing.
I love it.
Yeah. Cool.
All right, Ryan.
All right. I created a signal ghost, real name Alicia. Alicia is a shy and secretive net runner who kind of stumbled her way into the inner circle of this aforementioned band.
Noise design.
Noise design.
It's such a good band name, though.
It's so good. And she found it as her ticket out of her past of like scrounging and like basically survival every day, either like from her origins as a Warren rat, or moving into like a reclaimed city and trying to just survive in a new environment and try to find what she needs to stay alive. She found a recording of
I forgot about this.
a certain lead singer that would completely expose her and probably ruin her career, and at the very least her image.
Yep.
And that's probably why she's got a little bit of a heads up in the corporation that we all work for. But she's also extremely good at net running. So there's also skill behind that blackmail.
Do I feel like we need to mention that Jules Meow Meow and Gotcha like constructed like her personalities to be popular? Like it's all a front and a lie, and like Jules is really using Gotcha's life story. Like, yeah, okay, I forgot about that.
Yeah, you're definitely like faking it and like
absolutely faking it.
Like you grew up just fine and you're acting like you didn't. You know,
Yep, I absolutely did. Okay,
absolutely.
Yeah, it's not very punk rock of you.
No.
Amelia, who did you make?
Great question. I don't see that I wrote down a name. Does anyone remember if I had a real name?
I don't think you
don't remember.
I don't think you had a real name. No,
okay.
I think you just had an alias.
Right. So, for everyone listening at home, we are recording this section slightly after the last one. And the last one was recorded a few days after I had one of my electroconvulsive therapy treatments. So I remember almost nothing. And I meant to listen back to the other episodes before we did this. And I did not. So I have an unnamed character. I'll try to think of a name. I do have a handle that is Shallow Empire, which is super cool.
Such a good handle.
It's a very good handle.
My role is the exec. And I am like the label manager for noise design. Right, noise design?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so I work in like media and communications. I do publicity, all that kind of stuff, and sort of like manage the career. And I've like I grew up in a safe corp zone, and work at this company. I'm kind of slightly unethical sometimes, but not very often. Like, only when I need to be.
Maybe just a little bit.
Just like a little bit, because there's no ethical consumption under capitalism. And then I do have a boss who's also kind of a micromanager. But I do have high fashion business wear. Just write that down. And I value money the most, so I'm just like a real cool, fun kind of guy.
Typical exec.
Yeah, typical exec. I value money the most, but I like almost everyone. So
yeah.
I know we did like do some connections between people too, right?
Yeah, I don't know that they were super
I don't think they were like
in there.
Official.
Yeah, no, we just came up with it because we're all associated
that's
with
who
the
we are.
band. Yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
like you're the manager.
Yeah.
I don't remember details.
Yeah, I feel like we had started coming up with some of that kind of stuff just to try and like, because the rest of you sort of had like reasons to be connected. I feel like this always happens to me. It's like everybody else is like, oh yeah, what about that? And then I'm like,
no, you were in. You were totally in. Yeah. I think you knew about the blackmail tape too, if I remember.
That's probably true. Yeah.
That would make a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
Well, is how I got the job.
Yes, exactly.
But I don't think Jules Meow Meow knows about the blackmail tape.
Oh, you don't think that I know that
I don't
you
know.
have it?
I like.
Or you're just sitting on it?
I think I'm sitting on it.
You don't think that you've said like I have this on you and I know the truth?
I've said it to the exec to get my job.
Right.
I think I know about it, but I also think that like for me, that makes you like a safer bet then because it's like, oh, you're not some like riffraff, like you know.
Yeah. Grew up in a neighborhood that had been safe, that was only slowly
she comes from a
disintegrating.
good family, so it's probably fine.
Yeah.
Wow.
Amazing. Well, before we get further into fanfic, let's go ahead and dive into a segment that we are calling D20 for your thoughts.
D20 for your thoughts?
In this segment, we want to talk to our guests about their thoughts on the character creation process and how it relates to this system and other games. We got our big generic question out of the way last time you were on here 5 years ago. So we're going to start off with asking something else.
Yeah, go back and listen to that way old episode.
Yeah, go back
it's
and
got all sorts of stuff in it. Yeah.
Right. So we're going to ask something else. What do you look for in a system as far as character creation goes? So like, what pieces do you feel like you have to make great characters?
This is a challenging question. I feel like there's a lot of ways to make good characters. Well, I have a thought, but
do you? Oh, go ahead.
I was leading into it, but if you want to go first, you can go first, and then I'll build on.
Go.
Okay. So I think one of my favorite ways to generate great characters, and I feel like this is more of a shortcut to creating great characters, and it's something that we did in this particular character creation, is get kind of traits assigned, right? Like personality traits. Like there was a moment as we were going through where we got, and in this particular case, it was randomly rolled, but I actually love that because I think it's really fun to have to try and make stuff fit together because you come up with creative answers, right? But I think it's really important to, in whatever way it comes through, feed some kind of character traits to you so that you're not trying to come up with it wholesale. It is much easier to play in a sandbox of how do these things fit together, or like, why am I like that, than it is to be like, I could be anything.
Right.
I
need
scaffolding. I don't know. Like, yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Having personality trait scaffolding really helps guide into something. And I also think that makes that first time that you play a character, when you sit down at the table, when you have something to kind of pin your initial play of that character to, it is much easier to jump on something. And it's probably, a little stereotypical and not very nuanced at the beginning. That's, the way that it is. And then as you play them further, then you get to gain the nuance of whatever that personality trait is, right? But to have something to sit down at the table that like, okay, well, I'm, for example, Ryan's character is like shy, right? Like, that going in. Okay, you have something to start with, and then you can like go from there, right? I don't remember any of mine. Oh no. What am I?
Yeah. Well, I think you think about like a TV pilot too. And it's like, those characters aren't nuanced in the first episode of a TV series either.
Right.
It's
Not
all
at
very
all.
broad strokes, right?
Right. And
I do
think
like trying to make them fit together though, because I have like, my personality is rebellious and antisocial, but I also like almost everyone. So that's going to be an interesting mix.
I think the fact that I am sneaky and deceptive, and that I see other people as tools,
that informed a lot.
It informed a lot about not just my character, but also like the blackmail tape that we have, my relationship with Gotcha, like all of this stuff. And it made all of this stuff fit together. Like there's so many other ways that this character could have gone. But the fact that I know that they're sneaky and deceptive gave me a direction to steer into and move in that direction.
And I think in most situations, once you sit down to like play these characters too, if you find that those traits do not suit you,
Sure.
it's okay, because they aren't mechanical. And I
No.
think in most cases, a good GM will be like, okay, like we don't really need to,
Whatever.
It kind of helps shape your backstory and helps shape some of that early play. But then as you go on, if you find that those things don't suit you, cool.
Mhm.
Find something else,
Evolve. Yeah.
Right.
I don't know, Phil, what were you going to say? Because I know you had a thing too.
Well, I like everything you said for starters.
Thanks,
Because
Phil.
Aw.
I mean, so I am about to run this game for my players in about 5 hours.
Mhm.
So I did character creation with you guys and then did it again with them. So I really like that it comes out with personalities, NPCs as a
Mhm.
GM, right? They're NPCs that I get to pull right from Life Path that I can then be like, cool, I'm going to use your tragic love affair or your enemy or whatever to kick off our story, right? I can get those going, or I can save them and, sprinkle them in later. But the other thing I really like, and I do look for this in character creation, is what about this character creation system? What about the product of it? So your character makes you feel unique and special.
Mm.
And so the role abilities, in this do a really good job of making you feel special. And they actually do a much better job in Red than they did in the original Cyberpunk. The role abilities in the original Cyberpunk were okay, but they got a big upgrade coming into Red, and so now they're actually like a lot better. I think that like you get to do cooler things, you feel more like the role that you've been assigned, and I think it's a little less I think for Ryan as the Netrunner, it isn't that different, but for some of the other roles, you get like a much different you get like a more expanded palette of things you can do. Your role ability basically lets you get onto the net. But like the Fixer one now actually has like who I can contact, what night markets can I get invited to, or can I start up myself and things like that. The Solo gets the ability. I don't think none of us made a Solo. The Solo's role ability allows them per combat to kind of allocate bonuses to either hit or penetrate armor and things like that. And they can change them. They can even change it up in the middle of combat if they take a turn to kind of stop and kind of refocus themselves. So you wind up just getting like you feel a lot more like that role, which I think is good, because I think as players, and I don't play very often, but I think players want their character to feel not only special, but also hooked into the genre and the setting of the game. And I think the roles and role abilities do a good job here.
Oh, absolutely. Very cool.
I was trying to find like an exact description of what mine does. But...
Oh yeah, Amelia, you get an assistant.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
mine
like-
is called Teamwork. But yeah, I get all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, you get an apartment.
Yeah,
you
I
get
get
an
some fancy business wear. I get an assistant.
You have to take care of that assistant too. Like there are like per game, there's like a loyalty check to make sure your assistant doesn't like try to leave you.
Ooh.
Like you have to pay them compliments, give them bonuses, like not send them on suicide missions.
It's probably a good way to keep loyalty.
Yeah.
Mine is called.
Yeah, I guess it is. It is kind of disappointing with the Netrunner is you can do net running.
Well, I don't think that's disappointing. You get access to like a whole subsystem. Of the
Right,
game.
but like
But nobody else can do that.
Is it just
So-
locked away from every other role
Yeah.
then?
Yep, no one
That's
else can
really
do that.
interesting. Okay.
Yeah, interesting. Mine is charismatic impact, influencing other by sheer presence of personality.
Yeah, you actually can get free stuff.
Oh. I
Like,
can
you can-
convince people to do me favors, buy me a drink or a meal, or give me a lift somewhere. And then as it gets higher, major favors, go to bed with me, with bunny ears around it, put in a good word for them, etc.
You can also start a riot.
I could start a riot. Oh, yeah. I want a riot. basically at levels 3 and 4, you can get like a, there was a whole show called this, what is it when you have like a following of people that are like your
Entourage.
You can have an entourage.
Oh, I see. Yeah, and mine allows me to just have more net actions per turn as my rank goes up. But I can do all sorts of fun things in the net. I imagine that people can browse like the net.
Basic stuff.
Basic stuff, but they can't do like the attacking and cloaking and all that sort of stuff.
Take over machines and things like that. That's all very, that is all the purview of the Netrunner.
That makes sense.
Yeah, mine says, just like a real corporate executive, the exec builds a team whose members help them accomplish their goals, whether legal or not, morale permitting. Team members have a visible job description, like secretary or driver, but also covert roles, such as netrunner, bodyguard, or assassin. Plus, they get free housing and a nice set of clothes. Pretty fancy.
Wow, if you get all the way up to the high levels of Rocker Boy, then yeah, it's like the Rocker Boys fans are basically a brainwashed cult-like following.
Y'all, at rank 6, I get health insurance, okay?
Oh my gosh.
Oh, you get trauma. You get trauma team.
Wow.
Trauma team is the health insurance that comes to you when you are injured.
Wow.
Like
I guess silver
they
coverage.
fly into the area with an armed, what's called an AV4. It's an armed hovercraft. And they drop down out of it and patch you up while like securing you from any gunfire or anything like that. Yeah, trauma team is a whole thing.
I love this. Oh. Yeah, no, I like games where the roles are really I don't want to say clear, but like unique and
distinct.
Yes. Yeah, no, I do think that they really help you kind of like flesh out, kind of get a good sense of what your character is just based on that ability of like, okay, this is the thing that I am best at. This is the thing that's important to my role in the group too.
This is how I will influence the world that is specific to me. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I love the idea of like eventually like getting an assistant and all that kind of stuff too. And just because apparently my corporation is like international too, based on my life path stuff. So we have international offices in major cities. We can really set up some big shows for you if you.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like I've definitely sold out to the man here, but like also I'm sneaky and deceptive, so let's do it.
Oh, apparently my life goal is to save an imprisoned lover.
That sounds
cool.
like fun.
That sounds like fun.
That's cool.
So you two have been doing Panda's Talking Games for a while now, longer than our show's been around by about a year or so, give or take. It's effectively an advice show for listeners to ask TTRPG related questions and get some perspective on those topics from the two of you and your experience in the hobby. Have you ever felt surprised by any of the questions that you've been able to cover in the years? And is there one that sticks out in your head as particularly memorable to cover?
I'm laughing already because Phil and I both have this symptom of podcasting, which is, oh, we're finished recording. Cool. I don't remember any of it.
Yeah.
Like,
right?
What topics have we talked about? I know we just talked about GMPCs because we literally just talked about it yesterday.
Everything blends together unless you are talking about specifically like the beefness or
Sure. The beefness isn't even a gaming topic. The beefness was an outtake that went so hilariously bad. It almost
I think
ended.
we even talked about that on our last recording.
We might have. It would have been a lot closer to when it happened.
Yeah.
Because we had a whole discussion about turkey bacon and all of that.
That makes perfect sense.
Related in there.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm checking out past episodes to see if there's any that like really stick out
to us.
I mean, there's some common themes. There are some common themes that come around like every few years because we've been around long enough that we will get a topic that will be like, oh, we totally did it. And then we'll go look and be like, oh, we did it in episode 100 like 4 years ago. Yeah, we can
We can-
it's free. We can come back. It's
Opinions
it's basically
change.
now a new topic.
Yeah.
So we have done a bunch of episodes over the years on safety. We will always do episodes on safety. Like, I don't think that's a thing that we will ever skip over. Our
We
own
love that
thoughts
one.
on safety have evolved over time. So we've gotten much better. I think our answers to questions about safety have gotten much better over the years.
Yeah. The thing that I was actually going to say, and this is a thing that was mentioned to us pretty recently, is that so when you start a gaming podcast, you're like, oh, we're going to talk about gaming stuff. We're going to give gaming advice. It's going to be great, right? And the thing that people have started mentioning to us is we sometimes, right, because it is based on listener questions. So if nobody asks us about this, we don't talk about it. But people really do sometimes ask us about emotional social situations in gaming a lot, which is less about like mechanically, I want to roll this die, and more about like, you know, this situation is happening at my table. There's kind of been a bunch of them. They're not necessarily specifically related to each other, but for example, like having, you know, being in the middle of COVID, someone actually wrote us and said, one of the players in my game has passed away. How do I deal with this? And like that kind of question where there's, and it's not the only one, right? That's just the most maybe extreme example that I can come up with. But a lot of questions about like essentially handling the social emotional, constructions and community and culture that goes with having a gaming table or making a gaming table. And the conversations that we sometimes have about places that we are emotionally or like things that have impacted us emotionally about our particular games and gaming tables. When we started this show 5 years ago, I didn't think that's what we would be talking about. I'm really happy that we are. But in terms of being surprised by the direction that things have gone, that's maybe the thing that I think has surprised me the most. And it's something that people are really happy to hear from us frequently and have commented that they want more of, basically.
Yeah, absolutely.
So back in April, we did an episode 310 on dropped games, and we talked about the emotional fallout of dropped games. What is like just, I mean, from the immediate like, oh, we're now not getting to play to the, do people even want to play this game?
Do people like me? Yes.
Do people like me? Right. Like we just talked about all the emotions of it.
Yeah.
And I think it goes hand in hand with, and we've talked about this on the show as well. Neither one of us were in therapy when we started the show. And both of us have been in therapy for years while the show's been going on. And so we are far more aware and I think far more articulate about our own feelings.
Yeah, you're growing along with your show.
Exactly. Yep, exactly.
Like we're able to come in and talk about like, oh yeah, that, you know, like, oh, I understand. Drop games always give me a feel of like, do my, you know, players even like me, or what's my purpose or whatever. I would never have talked about that stuff years ago. That is a direct product of having a ton of therapy along the way. Yeah.
We don't, you know, do listener questions or whatever, but we do have our Evolution Cast episodes, which have a lot of those kinds of discussions in them, because ours is specifically player advice. And those are kinds of things that come up a lot as a player is, you know, like we have a whole episode on a session zero, like how to do a session zero. And it started because somebody asked me at one point, like, hey, do you know where I can find like a template of like stuff to talk about in a session zero? And I was like, no. And I tried to like do a search and couldn't really find anything. And it was like, I'm going to write one. And so I did. And we did an episode just like running through it. And now it's like a document that we have on our website and stuff like that. But I think even, you know, how many years later, Ryan, like 3, or it was like toward the beginning of our, right before COVID.
Yeah, that
or
was
like
episode 6 or 7 of the Evolution Cast episodes.
Yeah.
And we're on 21 now.
Oh, okay. So not really that. I mean, we also took like a 3-year break. But yeah, I mean, I think the way that we've talked about those kinds of things, and even now, like I look at it and, in the early days of some of those things, like I was still on an actual play and that didn't really end well. But like the things that have gone on in our lives have been, like we started making the show and I filed for divorce already, Ryan? But I know like
you were
in the
just
process, like
about
Dan was
to,
still
I think,
living with
yeah.
me when we first started making the show. So like I went through the process of divorce. I got diagnosed with bipolar. I had my hospitalization. I had my outpatient hospitalization. I've had, started ECT. Ryan's had another kid and moved, and I've moved a couple times, and we've gone through this pandemic. And, like I think, have you started therapy or were you always in therapy? I've been in therapy the whole time because
I started since I started the show.
Yeah. I mean, I think about like the way we've
partly
grown.
prompted because of working with you all this time.
I like that, my crazy could make you be like, ooh, I don't want that.
I think that's a bad way to interpret that comment.
Look, if I can do anything for anyone, I would like them to be like, wow, absolutely not. I'm going to go ahead and get some help. But no, I think the things that like we've decided to talk about have definitely changed. Like toward the beginning, it was very much like we started with like character voices, and that was cool. And our, then we went on, we did an entire episode on safety mechanics, and we did 2 episodes on like, hey, my home game doesn't feel like the actual plays that I've been listening to. Like what do I do about that? How do I, we had people from actual play shows on to talk about some of that stuff, saying like, okay, here's some of the things that we do that you can bring to your game to make it sound like that. But also like from the mouths of actual play people, it doesn't look like this before it gets edited. Like, don't worry about it,
We did it. We actually did that question somewhat recently. When I say somewhat recently, that means it could be any time between like a month and a year ago. I don't remember.
Right, for sure. What is time?
And definitely also kind of talked about that from the perspective that, I mean, I used to run an actual play podcast.
Yeah.
I might have been the one that asked that question.
I think you were, Ryan. I think you were. And then you had to edit in your own voice, asking the question. Well,
that was the TikTok question.
Done. Well done indeed. Perfect.
Just as planned.
It was good. I don't remember when we answered it. We definitely did. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just think it's really interesting. Gaming is such a social activity. I think that's a large part of the reason that many, many people are drawn to it, because it is a social activity. I don't think that we always talk about it in terms of the social aspects. And so I think the interesting evolution that Pandas has taken has been a large shift from talking about mechanical stuff into talking about sometimes mechanical things and then a lot of social dynamic stuff. And even in the episodes that are about mechanical things, there's a lot of social dynamic stuff in them because a large part of our advice generally, it's like 80% communicate, 10%, 10% visualize the risk reward factors of the thing you want to do, and like 10% maximize the good stuff, minimize the bad stuff, right? Like that's gaming advice, just like in general. Like
I think like almost every episode there's a point like of our player stuff of me saying relationships require communication. Your gaming group is a type of relationship.
Yeah.
You have a, like even if it's not a friendship, you have a social relationship with those people. And in order for this relationship to work, you need to communicate.
So it's pretty funny because we are very clear. I think that most of our advice is generally just like, hey, you should communicate with the people that you play with.
But that's like so much of what all relationship advice is like, have you talked to them about it though?
I think.
You know how many TV shows wouldn't exist if people would just like talk to each other? Sometimes it's very stressful for me.
Our focus has been not so much you need to talk, but
how?
Here, let's at least give you the language by which you can use to talk about
how
these
do you,
things.
Here is some ideas about how to approach this conversation and some things you may want to think about asking if they're important to you or whatever it is. Yeah, there's a lot of that.
So here's a question too then. Like how has, I mean, and maybe this is too personal, but like how has like doing therapy changed that kind of advice that you give? Like, has it gone from just like, you should talk about it to like, here's how? Or
Mhm.
is it like, do you just think about it differently? Or
I think there's a lot more empathy in our
Yeah.
advice when we talk, like, not only do we say talk about things, but really like understand the feelings involved. Like, yes, there's an issue at the table. Like, for instance, here's one that always comes up, right? Like, which is, what if players fudge dice during the game? Right. And in the past, I would have told you, like, I would have cracked down on that stuff. Like, I would have like made players roll in front of me. Like, I'm talking like 10, 15 years ago. Right? I'd have made players roll in front of me and all this stuff. But like over time, what I've come to realize is like, who cares? And not that I mean that like waving a hand and saying like, who cares? But more like, hey, this person needed a win today. Like they're having a shitty day. They fudged one roll because they haven't hit anything. And I don't know what else happened to. Maybe I do. Maybe I know what happened to them before they got to the table, because we often talk. My group talks before we play, but they may just need that win to like make their day bearable. Why am I getting in the way of that?
And like in the grand scheme of things, like what is the long-term
Correct
outcome of either of those things? Of like, okay, I cracked down and I've made it less fun for them. Like, because so much of my thought process too around role-playing games is like, we're doing this for fun. Like it has game in the name. And while some of the games that we play are serious and emotionally heavy and all of that kind of stuff, it's all stuff that like we have bought into because there is a level of enjoyment in that for us. And so like, I very much feel like as long as what that person is doing is A, making it more fun for them, and B, not making it less fun for other people, what is the harm?
Yep. Exactly.
You know? Yeah. Yeah, I think it's really, I would be really interested to go back to, and like I should listen to some of our earlier stuff and just see, because I feel like the questions that we're asking now too are like a lot more, a lot deeper, and a lot less about like the mechanics too, and starting to get into like, okay, but like why?
But also like there's only so long.
How does that make you feel?
There's only so long you can talk about game mechanics. Like what are we on, year 6? Like, we already talked about world building. We already talked about, I don't know what else, like how to, ideas on how to create a character, or like give
clues,
all of this stuff.
That's
right?
That's a reoccurring
the
one.
mysteries,
Clues and mysteries
are a reoccurring perennial topic. But, but we mechanically, we've talked about this stuff, right? Like, so,
right.
When you've covered all of the basics that you need to GM or play a game, like what are the next things you talk about? And I think the answer is that the next sort of layer of stuff that just comes up frequently is, the management of table relationships.
The people part of it. Like you step outside of the game part of it.
Exactly. And Phil has like the most stable game group like ever. He's been playing with some of these people for literally 30 years. And I'm not even kidding, right? Like it is the most stable thing I've ever seen in my life, like the most stable game group. But like for me, my game group, each of us as individuals, we started playing together, probably about 7 years ago now. And like every single one of us has gone through a major life change in that time between then and now.
Yeah.
Major life changes. There's nobody left who was married when we started who's still married. Like, it's like, it's been a wild ride, I think, for everybody. And the end result is that I, personally recently had to navigate some stuff with like, my game group can't meet and play the same way that we used to. Right. It no longer aligns with everybody's lives, needs, and lifestyles. And that was like difficult transition because that's my in-person group, Yeah. So, this stuff happens because life
it's funny
happens.
Because I'm like doing the opposite thing right now, that like I lost the game group in the divorce. Right.
Ugh.
But like they were all like my ex-husband's friends that he had known like for forever and had been gaming with forever. And so like I left or whatever. But now we're at a point, like almost 5 years since the divorce was finalized, that like he and I are okay. Like I always tell people, I'm like, he's great over there.
Yeah.
You know? And I've kept in touch still with some of those friends because they kind of became my friends over time. And like, they're talking about getting a group together. And the question was like, do you want to come? And it was like, okay, well, like, I really do miss gaming and I don't have another like frequent game group. So like, yeah, maybe. So like I've come full circle from like, oh, I had this group that I was a part of that I couldn't play with anymore and I was kind of sad.
Of course. Yeah.
So like, and it was the first time that I'd had like a pretty regular game as an adult either. So it ended like right as we were starting to make this podcast too. And since then, like now I've been making a podcast for 5 years. I'm designing my own game. I was an Ennies judge for a couple of years. Like part of me is like very excited to go back and be like, listen here, boys. Like,
I know what I'm talking about.
I know, like, I mean, yeah, like I'm no longer the only woman in the group either. Like,
I mean, that also helps.
Yeah.
I mean,
but yeah,
there's also fun things like, you know, Phil came out to visit me recently and he just happened to be here. My crew now plays approximately bi-monthly instead of bi-weekly. And we just play one-shots, mostly LARPs now. Like we're really into like one-shot parlor LARP, afternoon LARPs. That's like where we've landed. And so Phil was actually here for the one that we did last. And the thing that I remember and that I take for granted about my particular gaming group is that we're all super queer. Like we have a straight man. Just one.
Well, you got to have your token straight man.
Exactly. He is our token straight man, right? And like, I just feel so unbelievably privileged to get to play consistently with people with whom I share a bunch of identity markers, right? Because it is a really amazing experience to have that kind of supportive atmosphere and then be able to take a lot of things about lifestyle for granted that you can't necessarily in other situations. So it was really fun to have Phil here because his group is very straight. I'm just going to call that out. So like, I don't think that random gay flirty flirt just happens at his table the way it just happens at mine. Like, you know, at my table, there's a lot of very pan, everyone is fair game in terms of character relationships.
Right.
It's just the way that it is. And it's a baseline assumption that we work with. Right.
Yeah,
it was quite fun.
Pretty
actually.
Funny. Anyway, like he got to come play with the queers.
Yeah, actually missed it quite a bit. It was actually a lot of fun. It wound up as a topic in my therapy session, like after I got back from my trip. So, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. I don't know. I think gaming is in a lot of ways how we make connections with people. And it is in a large part about making connections with people. And it is nice when you, making connections with people like that, playing games is hopefully fun. It should be fun. We won't get into, defining fun, whatever that means to you. But
we have an episode on that. You can go back and listen.
Whatever. How many kinds of fun did you define? 8 of them. Yes. Good. Perfect. But there is something to being seen by the people that you play with, seen and validated in your identity that I think is also just a really wonderful experience. I don't know exactly how we got from the question that you actually asked us all the way
Doesn't
here.
matter.
It was all about feelings.
Feelings.
It's all about feelings.
Little feelers.
I sense we could probably talk a couple hours about this specific topic even.
So our next topic for just like a really hard shift here.
Sure.
Just like a absolute whiplash. Let's talk about character sheets. We like to look at them and see, because it's the first impression that most people have of a game, sitting down to like, quote unquote, play the game. What sort of things do you think that these sheets tell us about what playing this game is going to be like, what the experience is? Phil has feelings. I can see
there's
it.
a lot of stuff.
There's a lot of skills. That was
so
many skills.
It's a 3-page,
so many lines.
right? It's a 3-page character sheet.
It's not only skills, it's equipment, it's cyberware.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, but there are so many skills.
There's a lot of management that goes on for a character, right? Skills, I think we talked about it when we were actually making characters. And I'm actually kind of experienced this now as I've been writing my first adventures of like, there are certain skills like the bolded ones that I'm like, okay, like these are the skills I'm going to write into the adventure. If people have other interesting things they want to do using their other skills, that's cool, but I'm not really expecting. Like, I'm not expecting people to have tracking when I assume everyone has perception.
Right. Which I do like, though, that they bold those. So they're like, these are the ones that you're going to like.
These are like the core.
These are going to be important. You're going to work off of a lot.
Yeah.
I like those kinds of visual cues on gaming sheets that it's like, hey, this part's important.
My rough feel for how I'm going to run that is basically like, and I just wrote this up for a scene in the game, which is there was like a crime scene and there's a blood trail that like leads off to a body. And I'm like, cool. If you have, like everybody has perception, it's this difficulty perception, but it's actually an easier tracking roll.
Oh, yeah. I love that kind of stuff where it's like, hey, if you use this skill, you'll get slightly different information or it's a little bit easier or, but like, you can
expect everybody will find blood, but the tracker will like get down and be like, oh, like this person was shot and was definitely running, away from, this, where everyone else will be like, I see blood on the ground and follow it, logically to where it goes. So but you're not wrong. Like there is a lot going on this sheet. I play, I'm used to playing so many indie games where it's like, oh, here's your playbook, which is like the whole character, like in a
circle
folded
these
piece of
three
paper.
things. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sort of live
and
for
this
that.
is not that. This is a game that if we were going to play, like if I was going to try to get Senda to play it, I would have to campaign really hard.
It would be some work for you. You would definitely have to be the keeper of the rules. Here's what what this sheet tells me. There is a level of specificity and complexity to this game that you will want to buy into, just in terms of like mechanics, to really enjoy it. You're going to want to be playing this game if some of your fun comes from mechanical fun and rules mastery, right? Because this is the kind of game that you will be very successful at with rules mastery, understanding what all these skills are and really pinpointing where you want to be good. That's my impression from the character sheet.
Yeah, I think, though, that, like, it does look like a lot. But, like, once we've sat down to do it, I do appreciate the fact that this is a thing that I come back to in almost every game that we look at is, was it easy for me to figure out where things go?
Mostly, yeah.
And it was.
Good. Yeah.
And it was. Because there are, like, lots of times where it's like, okay, the game told me to create this stat or skill or whatever. Is there a box for it? No, it doesn't.
Where do I put it?
It flowed nicely. It was like very clear, like, okay, here's your skills, here's your gear, here's, like the life path stuff. There was a spot to write all of that.
Yeah, that was good.
Which I appreciate. So it's like I can keep track of those things. And, even like that third page that is just like all of your cyberware, I like that there's like this little skeleton and it like points to like, these are the things that go where and what it does, and it's like, so while that first page looks like a lot, it's still pretty clear what it's for and how I would use it.
Yes, it is. They have definitely done a good job of making it clear where to find and where to put the information, which is super good.
Yeah, it's just a beefy sheet.
It's pretty beefy. Yeah, it's kind of chunky.
It is, but it's interesting because you can tell how important the skills are to the game and like how important combat is to the game when the first page is your skills and weapons and armor and very little real estate for like who this person is as a person. And even then that real estate is just a bunch of numbers. You have to get to the second page before you even think about like, where was this person from? What type of personality does this person have?
Well, to be fair, if you were in game, since there aren't any roles hung on that information, in terms of the reference of the stuff that I would assume I need, I don't know, Phil can probably speak to this more, actually running the game right now. But that first page seems to contain a lot of the like, what do I need to get to quickly?
Yep.
Yeah, there's this game comes with a weird dichotomy of like, hey, our character creation process ever since the game first was created has this really cool detailed life path system for giving you really cool backgrounds. Also, it's got this like really murdery kind of combat system. So like you may not ever get to use said cool things because you may just like take a bullet to the head and go down in an alleyway. Like there's this like, I don't know, I wrestle with this because I love the life path path system, I would never get rid of it. It's probably one of my favorite features that Cyberpunk has always had. But at the same time, I'm like, well, now that I've put this much investment into a character, like, I don't want it just to get blown away. So like, what does the game do to mitigate it? And they do a little to mitigate it, but it's, this game's still pretty dangerous. Like you can't mess around. You can't mess around with the combat system. Like heroic is not your best, shot at long life in this game.
Yeah. So this is not a rainbow simulator or anything.
Yeah. Do not jump at the dragon with your sword out. Like, shoot that thing from a distance. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, how do we think character creation went for Cyberpunk Red? How do we think it stacks up to other games that we played?
I appreciate the fact that it does have like those different levels of engagement with character creation. Like there's the option because, like we talked about, that there's a lot going on. There's a lot to keep track of. And so I like that we got the option of like, hey, if you want to get down into the nitty gritty and pick all of these things and do all of these things, like go for it if that's your jam. And then, all the way to like, we've pretty much like, you fill out a couple boxes and you're good. And then like this sort of middle ground of like, I am somebody who does a lot of character creation. I know what I'm doing, but I'm not familiar with this game. And then, the like sort of very direct, like, okay, you roll this, you've got this, stick it here.
I did appreciate the silos. If we would have continued rules as written, I wouldn't have appreciated the silos when it came to skills. But I like that we were just like, you know what? Who cares? Let's go off script and let's follow it as a guide for doing the skills. Like, oh, I should probably have this skill. I didn't think about that. I'll just take a few points in that. It's fine. But then otherwise, I should have this skill because it's relating to my background, or I should have the skill because it's relating to what I'm envisioning this character to be.
Yeah.
But
I also think
that makes sense.
Like the fact that it gives you those three options almost does give you a level of permission to do that because it's like, like you could have picked an option where you could do that. So like, there's nothing here that says like, here's your package, off you go. You have to do it this way,
I like the idea that, like, for instance, if I had somebody dropping into town, like in town, and was going to come join up with my game, I could be like, "Hey, cool, use the fast path thing, and let's make you like an MP. Let's make you a character for tonight's game, right? Really quick, just pick a role, do the fully prepackaged, one, boom, boom, boom. 20 minutes later, they're put their stuff down on their sheet and they're off and running, and at the same time, they did a nice job of kind of recognizing, like, from the original game, because the original game was the most fiddly version. So it was nice, like, when they put the other two options in, they didn't take away the one for like the hardcore players who were like, no, back in the day, I always picked all my skills. So like, you can still do that, right? Like you can still do that. But if that's not your jam, don't.
Yeah.
Like you have some options.
I think it solves for also like, I want to run this as a one shot, but I don't want to pre-gen the characters. I want people to be able to actually make them at the table. Awesome. You could run through that quick selection, the simplest version, at a one shot table. You could totally do it in that amount of time, right? If I were actually going to play this game, suddenly I get the feels like I used to get with my 3rd edition D&D characters, right? I want to go through and pick everything, right? And I would spend the time and I would read up on everything and I would read through all the equipment and I would do all of that stuff. But that is a time commitment. And I think it would give you more opportunities to truly, I guess what it is like, with a character that has this number of switches that you can switch, I want to know 2 things. I want to know what all the switches do so that I make good decisions, because I am a perfectionist, maybe a recovering perfectionist. I'm trying. We talked about therapy. Anyway, and then on top of that, like, then I do suddenly want to custom control it to make this character match my vision of playing them, so that the experience of playing their personality at the table doesn't suddenly differ from the skill set that I have to actually roll with. Because that's always sort of I don't know, it's one of those things that can break a game for me when I sit down and it's like, I should be really good at this. And then I'm like, but mechanically I'm not.
Right.
And I'm like, wah, wah. Like, this character's personality is always going to lean them into doing this thing, but they're not actually good at doing this thing. Like, this doesn't make any sense, right?
I also think, though, that it, like, gives you a good way to lead up to that.
Sure.
Because I think, like, if I sat down and, like, knew I was going to play this game, even still, doing all of those fiddly bits would be kind of overwhelming.
It's a lot.
Whereas if I sat down and, like, did, like, once or twice of that sort of, like, mid-level kind of a thing, I'd be like, okay, I know what this is getting at and, like, what things I'm trying, you know, I have a better sense of what all of those levers do.
Yeah,
you know?
It is pretty funny because I speak to this now from the perspective that we did the middle ground, like, character creation. And I'm like, cool, everything makes sense. If I were going to now go create a character I was going to play in a game, I would build them from scratch. Right.
Yep.
But I don't know if I would have said that having not built a character before.
Right.
Oh, yeah. Exactly. It's very intimidating approaching this system.
Yeah, when you look at the character sheet, there are
you look at the characters
many
and think, oh my
skills.
goodness.
Oh.
Yeah. Like, this is going to be a lot of math. This is going to be really difficult. But, like, going through the PDF for the book was really nice, especially PDF format where everything was hyperlinked.
Yeah, that was great.
It's a great, very accessible PDF.
It is
book.
extremely accessible
lovely.
PDF, which is really nice. The physical book would look gorgeous. Like, it looks like this would be a gorgeous physical book to have.
Ask Phil,
But,
he
like,
just bought it.
It's right over my shoulder.
But, like, you know, comparing to other crunchier games, I don't think the actual walking through all of the points of doing the character creation was too tedious.
I think they did a lot of work for clarity on how it worked and how to walk you through step by step. And between that and matching those steps to the layout of the character sheet boxes, like we talked about before, kept it very straightforward.
I will say, from having just handled the book a little bit since I bought it yesterday, the other thing I greatly appreciate is, yes, it's a game, right? It's pretty fiddly. I don't think it's the most complex mechanical game that I even own or play. But the book is super easy on the eyes. Like, it is far more accessible in terms of, like, size of print, size of tables. The book goes through a lot of cases where they go to one column in an 8.5 by 11. They do 2 or 3 column when they get into like the setting text and stuff like that, where they're just kind of chunking more background stuff at you. But they did not squeeze real estate on the things that, like, you need to get into for this game, like the tables, those kinds of things.
It has lots of, like, different sized headings. So it's like, this is the section, this under, you know, like level 1, level 2, whatever. And even in the book, without, like, having a linked PDF or anything, on almost every, like, thing that you need to know, it's like, for more information on this, see page, blah, blah, blah. So, like, even though it's not a linked PDF that you're looking at in the physical book, it still tells you, like, hey, the rest of this information's on page 173. So you can very easily find it too, which I found really nice. Like, they do a really good job of, like, clearly changing, like, the font size and what's bold and what's not for, like, this is important and all that kind of stuff.
The sidebars are really nice and useful too.
Yeah. I will say too that, like, I appreciate games that sort of give you different levels of accessibility on entry, of, like, you know, like, how much brain power do I have to put into this? Because there are some games where it's like, I want to play this. This looks really cool. I do not have the mental energy to engage with this. And so I like things that kind of offer different levels of that. I also think that, you know, like, we did have Phil to explain everything to us, but I was able to do this a couple days after doing shock therapy where like my brain doesn't work. Talking is hard. Being awake is hard. Like functioning as a human is hard, and I was still able to do it. So like that for me is like a good test of like, this is accessible. Like I, and just had my brain shocked and I can still do it. I'm not allowed to sign legal documents, but I can make a character.
Nice.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I enjoyed the process too.
Yeah.
I enjoyed that. If I wanted to, I like going through the middle path, I can see if I did this from scratch, there's so many opportunities to min-max. And I love that so much. Yeah. And like, yeah, for a campaign of this, I would be min-maxing.
Exactly. Yep.
And creating the exact character that I wanted, going with the random rolls and creating this cool, everything's right there at our fingertips, just going through that process. And that's really fantastic.
I just really love Life Path too. Like we haven't gotten to do it very much, but it's such a fun way to create characters that it's like, okay, here's where you started and then this thing happens and then this thing and then like, and the way it's like, okay, now because of this, you get this. And like it helps you create a more like vibrant 3-dimensional character too.
More games should have life path systems.
They really should.
Yep.
Yeah, it doesn't need to go to the level of Traveler or anything like that.
That's fine.
Yeah. Space Millennials, the RPG.
Right. Yep. Exactly. But yeah, I enjoyed it. And I think more games with life path is definitely something that needs to happen. Like, can you imagine D&D with life path, I guess?
It'd be fun.
Yeah, I actually think it'd be great.
Yeah. And then you would have useful skills.
Wow. Throwing shade.
Why do we have sailing? It's my favorite. I want to know, particularly from Phil, how does character creation kind of like set you up for like what play is going to be like? Have we gotten any kind of taste of like what playing this game is going to be like, or like has it informed any part of what that experience is going to be?
Yeah, I think so. Like as a GM, right? If I'm looking over these characters, I can see how I'm going to shape my stories, right? Like we're probably not going to do a lot of straight on combat. We don't have a solo, we don't have a nomad, those kinds of things. So we're going to probably lay low of those, but we have room for corporate intrigue. Right. We have what's going on at the street. Like what is our rocker girl's message? Like what is getting, told to the people? And then we have, all the kind of back and forth of doing gigs and finding gear and, landing jobs and things like that. We have our net runner to kind of help, get us information, get into things, right? Like you're like part digital thief, part physical thief. So, what we're not going to be as a group is like straight up combat. We will have some, we'll be able to hold our own, but we'll run.
Run away.
Combat's the thing we do when we accidentally got caught doing the other thing.
Right. I do have a gun.
Right.
I suppose.
Right. Me too.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I have a pistol and not a small amount of points in handgun, but also I don't have, all the big stuff.
Yeah. Also, I have a body of 4.
Right.
I appreciate too how, like, especially with our groups in particular, like there's so much variance in what stories we can tell. We can tell these like really small-ish, stories, small personal stories to ourselves. Or we could be like, you know what? I don't like what our corporation's doing. Let's start a rocker evolution or revolution, right?
Yeah. Start our own record label.
Yeah, start our own record label, or like incite the masses through song.
Yep.
Right? Like there's all sorts of really cool like punk stuff that we can do with this. And like I can see all of those avenues opening up just from doing the character creation in this.
Well, yeah, and I think that like we've got some cool hooks for like intra-party conflict that can possibly happen about like,
blackmail.
you know what? Let's talk about that. Should we discuss our fan fiction, or should we should do one more question first, Ryan?
Should we do the flaws?
We could do. We could talk about what the flaws are. Yeah, just a little bit.
Let's hop into what do we think are the flaws of this system for the character creation are.
Ryan, there are so many skills. There are so many.
There are.
But how do you know if you can pilot, sea vehicles
right
without that skill?
There is not. They didn't abstract out a lot of the skills. I guess that's what I would say.
Like literally the sailing.
Right. I like riding though, because it like in my brain it's like, is that like riding a horse? Is that like am I a terrible passenger in a car? Like I have no points in riding. I am a horrible backseat driver.
Awful.
So here's the funny thing about the system is that like if you don't have the skill, you just roll with just the base attribute. Right. So, if you're trying to ride the horse, because it is riding a horse, if you are trying to ride a horse, you roll with just reflex.
I'm not bad at that, actually.
So skill bloat, I think skill bloat's actually a real, I think skill bloat's probably the biggest weakness of this system. Like, I think it's nice that you have like all these options for skills, but like there are so many, and there have been arguments over the years over personal grooming and wardrobe and style. But those actually do give you a bonus to social interactions if you have skill points in them because you look good and present yourself well. But like, I don't know, could this game be, could you cut 20, 30, 40% of the skills out of this game? Yes. Like you absolutely could. It's not a palladium amount of skills.
Yeah, accounting, business. Like
how dare
Ryan knows, right? It's not a palladium amount of skills.
It's true.
But it is not a trivial amount of skills.
You do have a skill for land vehicles, air vehicles, sea vehicles, and animal vehicles, basically.
I will say this though. In the book, in the skill section, there is a sidebar where the designers admit, like they say, like, look, we don't know what game you're playing, so we don't know what skills you may or may not need. But they do acknowledge, like, you shouldn't need all these skills. Like, but there are, for instance, if you were going to play a nomad story where your nomad clan was on the water and one of your main activities was finding derelict cargo ships and recovering items from them, then the sea pilot, the sea tech, and things like that probably are more important in the game. But like, if you're not doing that, nobody's putting points in those. But they're still on the character sheet.
Like, they're still using that real estate. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, and I could see a game where, like, you have a bunch of characters that it's like, this one is a good pilot and this one is a driver, and like those skills are exclusive because of the team that we've built.
Like a heist.
And I guess in that way, like, could you potentially make a character sheet where, like, you have less boxes, but like you write those things in so that there isn't that bloat? Sure. But then I also as a player would look at that and be like, there's so many blanks, there's so many things I have to choose and I don't know what to choose. And where it's like almost better to like have them as like things that I check off that like, it's like, again, like swings and roundabouts. I don't know which is better. Like having a bunch of blanks that I have to fill in feels overwhelming, but also having like so many things that I don't need looks busy and also kind of overwhelming. So
I think to a certain extent, as Phil said, it is a symptom of the fact that kind of like D&D, you could play this game in so many different ways, right?
Right.
So this has every skill that you might need depending on what kind of story you decide to tell. So I think it's really funny that you keep bringing up sailing as a skill, actually, because I played a D&D game where we were specifically pirates, and the sailing skill was a big deal.
Right. Oh, yeah. So for me, my like the example
story, right?
Yeah. The example I always use sailing for is like when you level up and the game is like, here, you get these skills, and they're not like related to anything that happened narratively. Like where like the running joke for me is like you went on this adventure that was all like cave diving,
Now
and they're
you
like,
get
you're sailing,
woohoo!
right? And you're
Well,
like, this doesn't what?
And the hilarious thing is that game that I just talked about, we all started with a bunch of skills that were specific to being pirates, like tying ropes and sailing and all
For
of that
sure.
stuff. And then the GM was like, how about we go play this adventure in the middle of a desert? And we were like, cool. And then none of us had the right skills for that story, right?
Like, we're
Yeah.
woefully incompetent.
Yeah. I'm like, well, okay, all these points in sailing really could have gone somewhere else, right?
Right.
So yeah, but
And then like your question, like, well, how can I translate this into something?
yeah, because the skills are really specific. I think if you wanted to transition what kind of story you were telling in the middle of a game, as happened to me, it would be a challenge because your skills are very specific. But it also gives you the ability to choose skills that are very specific to the kind of game that hopefully you've discussed, because as we've been talking about communication. So hopefully you've had a conversation like Phil has been having with his players about what kind of story are we telling? Who are we? So that you are making the correct skill selections for that story from the very large list of skills. But I think that means, I mean, I think it speaks to the fact that it's a conversation you have to have, because you could play so many different kinds of games within this framework, right? It could be a game about, like for us, for our crew, it would be, kind of inspiring people to rise up, or like dealing with corporate intrigue and like dealing with the fact that like this band's backstory doesn't match what they say publicly and like all of that kind of stuff. And that's not like performing heists on corporations to steal corporate secrets. And that's, also not going out to hunt down cargo containers of supplies, right? So that's those are three completely different games, like three completely different styles of story and game that we could be telling already.
Which is, I think, a conversation, too, that people can, again, communication.
Oh, yeah.
You can have with a GM, or a GM can have with players about, like, well, what does it mean when we don't have that kind of skill? And I know, Phil, you talked a little bit about of, like, okay, if you have tracking, it's easier. And if you don't, then it's not. But my brother is, well, now he's the forever GM, but he hasn't been, like, running his own games for very long. And a couple of years ago, he asked me for a suggestion, and they started playing Burn Bright. And he was telling me a couple weeks ago, he's like, one of the things that I will take from that game to every other game I play going forward is, if you can justify to me why that skill works, you can roll. It might be easier, it might be harder. But he's like, for me as a GM, one of the most satisfying things is watching my players contort themselves trying to explain to me why this skill will work for that. Like, his wife will come up with like the greatest justifications for like why her education, whatever, like helps with this like mechanics, role or whatever. And he's like, honestly, for me, like, he's like, even if the game doesn't say that, it is such a good time to watch these people try to explain to me why this thing will work. And I love being able to do that in games too. Oh, yeah. And it is a little bit harder in a game that has so many skills, where it's like, no, there is a specific thing for that and you don't have it. But I do just love the idea of, like, as a GM, having a good time watching people like try to justify it to you.
Yeah, I mean, on the other side of the coin, because there's so many skills that you can choose from, you can play any sort of story you want as long as you gear your skills towards that. Right. Yeah, the game has not limited what you're as
like.
As long as you don't have a GM that's like, oh, I'm going to show my group. Now you are a bunch of pirates in the desert.
Right. Don't do that, maybe.
Right.
It
wasn't
like I can see,
it wasn't the best experience.
This was a bad choice. No, but if you're doing it on purpose, just don't do that.
Yeah. Having that many skills definitely tells you, both as a player and as a GM, that this game isn't necessarily locking you into like, this is the kind of story we have to tell. This is the game. Like, it has to be a corporate heist.
Right.
End of story. Like, we can have this weird, like, rock band secret thing,
I can also see, like, every player creating 3 characters that specialize in different things and now you are a heist crew, and you get to just choose which character fits for the heist that you're doing.
Right. And what happens if that person's not there? Like, I also feel like the skills that you don't have can tell a really fun story there too.
Absolutely.
Right? Of like, okay, well, as long as all your players are on board, you can have a fun time being like, well, now you're in a desert. Like, and you're like, okay, like, how did we end up here?
And now what do we do? Yep.
Yeah. And then watching everybody just like stumble their way through it can also be a good time if people have bought into that. Yeah.
No, there aren't any twins. If it's going to be the comedy of errors, you have to have at least one set of twins, preferably two. And they should really have the same names just to really up the ante. Because you got to have, the same servant name and the same like master name, just so that when they run into people and they're misrecognized, they call them the right name, and then everybody thinks that they're losing their minds. That's just really, really key in on that. Also,
why is every game not just that?
Yeah.
That's
cool.
Yeah. I don't know. Ryan and I got to like when we did Pasión de las Pasiones. We got.
Oh my God! Did you play twins?
Yeah, we played as twins.
We did. We did.
We created
and
characters
the key defining feature of my twin was that no matter what Ryan did, I was just like a little bit hotter. It was like the only way that you could tell the difference between us is that I always had one less buttoned.
Wow.
I had the power though.
Yeah, you had the power. Yeah, but I had one less button.
I know.
I love that game so much. I don't think I can express to you.
Great. It's great. It's great.
It's so
good. Okay, so let's do our favorite part right now. Let's do our fan fiction of like what would happen if we played this game. What's our story here? Like,
I really like the idea of starting up our own record label, right? Like we go to war against the parent label. Like we start with a parent label, then we go to war like against them. We start our own label and we start like trying to rescue or extract other artists from that corporation.
That would be really cool.
I love the idea though that like we all obviously have very different reasons for wanting to do this. And I think for me it is like, if I'm the executive of this label, I'm going to make more money. I have a higher up who is a micromanager that I do not like, right? And so like for me, it's very much about like this like personal power. I can make more money. I can stick it to that manager that I hate, but like obviously for other people, it's going to be a very different reasoning behind it. So like how we go about it, when we do it, why we do it, can really create some cool intra-party conflict too.
Yeah, it's interesting because my character is really bad at conversation and like human perception because my empathy is 2.
Oh dear!
Oh,
when
love
I start the
that
game.
for you.
So I'm like borderline unstable, right? And so like I'm like I have to follow this group because this is the only leverage I have to get a foot in this world.
Right.
Like if it wasn't for this leverage, I wouldn't have had this job. I'd still be scrapping in whatever town nearby and like surviving day to day. So I have to stick with this group. And like, do I make friendships? Do I get out of my shyness at all, or is that still like this is our net runner? Don't worry about them. They're kind of aloof.
Right.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I feel like for me, since my life goal is to forget my past, probably because the past that I've told everyone that I have is a giant lie. I think that there's a certain amount of like, I can't be really successful as a rocker under this corporation because they already have a bunch of other people on their label, right? And I'm not the most important person on that label. But if we leave and Shallow Empire, like, and I'm their cash cow, basically, then she's gonna like give it her all in terms of making me successful.
I also think there's probably like a part of you that's like, the more I distance myself from the way I started, the further I am away from like that past too. And if we like get on this new label, right. But like without you obviously knowing that, like, I know exactly who you were. That
no,
like,
what are you talking about? I was like scrappy, like living on the streets.
Right.
And I
so
love
you're like,
that you
I
would
can
keep
distance
that up,
myself
right?
from how I started, and I'm like, you know, like you're like bringing the one person that knows along with you.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
That's
well, no, I
amazing.
mean, Gotcha knows because this is our little conspiracy. We just don't know that the rest of you know.
Yeah.
Right. Which I love that. Like
Everybody
that's because
knows.
that's the part is that like everybody knows and you're like, I'm
But,
like,
like,
I'm
uh-huh.
doing such a great job and of like hiding
I
this
totally
and how
am.
like,
Yep.
Yeah.
like everybody knows.
Everybody knows.
I like it that, Amelia, that your character is kind of like the glue of all of us too, because like, you know that everybody knows the secret and now you have the control over that information.
Right. Right.
Even though I think I have the control over the information, it's really in your hands
Right.
at
Right.
that point,
Yeah.
which is amazing. Also, concert montages.
Oh, hell yes. And tweet, but like concert montages like Macross Plus style concert montages with like
Yes.
holographic versions of like things floating over the audience and like interacting with people.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there also have to be like
Scream.
outfit, you know, like because you're going to have to do press and all that kind of
I mean,
stuff too. There's
absolutely.
definitely got to be like tons of like outfit montages for all of us.
I do
too.
like all of the like quote unquote nonsense skills that we would be utilizing often
Yes.
right.
in this game. And that's just tickles me really. Like you don't get that often in a game, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm going to roll my wardrobe and style skill.
Mhm.
Oh yeah, I have
because
points
that's
in wardrobe and
literally
style and personal grooming and bribery and like those social skills are like I got them.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
I
amazing.
play this game because I want to be able to describe the wild coolness that the concert montages get to as we get better
Yes.
and get
Yeah.
better spots. Like Gotcha's got to get us better and better places to play.
I know.
Mhm.
Get more money, get more cool looking
Mhm.
gear, right? And like incorporate all that nice neon aesthetic.
Well, I think,
And
I mean,
everything.
honestly, I think your character, Ryan, would have to also, like, on top of whatever, like, actual thievery stuff we do, like, you would have to manage any sort of holographic, all the display stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
Mhm.
Oh yeah. Like
The-
what? Because I think that's what we partly decided too. Is that like part
Mhm.
of Ryan's job is all of the tech
Effectively
stuff.
running
Yeah.
the lights.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
like
you
you
gotta
are
run the
like the
tech.
technical director of this. Like
you gotta be the stage
show.
manager on this.
Right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's amazing.
So what is Gotcha
Or-
doing in all of this aside from just like
Gotcha
providing
gets what you-
backstory?
Well, Gotcha gets you what you need.
Mhm.
Gotcha gets you the gigs. Gotcha is reaching out to the other artists to start pulling them over to the label.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right. So like, that's, I think Gotcha's the one who kind of gets everything set up for the next gig, the next, extraction, those kinds of things.
Yeah. So I feel like you are like reaching out to a lot of those artists and then sort of being like, hey, like, don't worry, our exec is cool. Like,
Yeah.
and I'm like, once
Yeah.
you're here, like, I can do all of the sweet talking and everything to get you. Like, I'm like, I
Exactly.
can get you the gigs, I can do all that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. But you're the one that has to like convince people that
Talent
like,
You got to make the cold
Right.
calls,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. I'm going to gigs. I'm going to other people's gigs, giving it a listen, right?
Yeah.
Handing out my digital card, right?
Mhm.
Call
This
my
game-
agent.
Yeah.
This campaign sounds amazing.
Yeah.
I love it.
Well, and I'm also interested in like, what kind of things do we have to do to like get these people to sign with it? Because it's not just going to be money, because like we're talking
It
about,
also has to
revolution.
be safety.
Right.
And
And like
revolution.
people are
yeah.
going to want things in return too.
Yeah.
So like what kind of jobs are we having to do to like, okay, I'll
Yeah.
sign up to your label if
you get my
you can
family-
make sure that this
my family
right.
who's hostage at this other corporation or like living in like a rundown place somewhere. I need you to put them in better housing and then I'll sign with you or whatever it is.
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh man.
Oh, I love it so much.
The low stakes have never been so high.
Right, exactly.
I don't know. Have you read
Right.
Legends and Lattes? Because that's how I feel about that book. Anyway,
That's fair.
But don't worry, between us, we're going to take down Ticketmaster. It's going to be great.
That's true.
yes, yes.
That's the big bad in this story. Is just
The big bad is
Ticketmaster,
Ticketmaster,
right? Like
yeah.
that's the
They
corporation
survived.
that has wronged all of us.
Uh-huh.
Amazing.
Oh, so good.
Amazing.
Mhm. Yep.
Oh,
All right, so finally, we're going to get into our advancement discussion segment and take it up a level.
Take it up a level. Take it up a level.
So in this segment, we cover character advancement and character growth. So let's start by talking, how do you level up in this system? And how do characters change when that happens?
So your experience points in this game are called improvement points.
Mm-hmm.
I'll talk about how you earn them in a second, but let me first talk about how you spend them.
Okay.
They're pretty straightforward. You can spend your improvement points on increasing your skills and increasing your roll ability. Roll abilities being far more expensive because those, as we talked about earlier in the show, those tend to have some pretty big impacts. Yeah. Where skills are, skills are cheaper to increase. The skills kind of increase geometrically, looks like by 20s. It's basically, I think it's 20 points per level is what it looks like. And it looks like it's 60 points per level for roll ability. And then if you have any of those difficult, those times 2 skills, obviously that's 40 points per level. So that's pretty straightforward. Like you just, you want more handgun, you buy more handgun with your improvement points. What's interesting is, and my group asked me on Slack today, or they were like, are we using this improvement point system? The way that you earn points is what they call playstyle based improvement. So they have categorized 4 playstyles, broad playstyles. They're not radically different than other ways players have been grouped up, as in the categories are warriors, explorers, socializers, and role players.
Okay.
And you are to pick a primary and secondary role that you are into for the game. So maybe you like role playing and socializing, or maybe it's, warrior and explorer, whatever. Now, when you complete a job or mission, the group gets a lump of improvement points based on like the difficulty of the mission, how well it went, that kind of thing. The GM has a table in the back of the book that kind of tells them like anywhere from 10 to 80 points, how much that mission netted the group. If you complete the mission or job, whatever it is, in that session, then the group just gets the chunk of points. But if you are playing a session and you did not finish the job at hand, then everybody gets some amount of points between 10 and 80 points based on their primary or secondary play style. So during this session, I did like some really deep and important role playing, right? So like, for instance, I'm just going to zoom in for a second because I'm old. So at 10 points, the role player, you get 10 points for attempted to role play character often. Whereas like at 40 points, did something out of the ordinary role playing wise, a clever speech or an interaction in the game. And like topping out at 80 with did something really incredible in role playing, such as a heroic speech, star moment, or amazing influence on game outcomes through role playing. So the idea is that like it's encouraging you to play to the style that you're comfortable with and award you points for the style you're comfortable with. So this game doesn't just award points for, blowing stuff up or stealing stuff, but actually recognizes that maybe you want to be more of a social character. Maybe you're really just in it because you really want to, role play your character or whatever.
That's really cool. It's a little more to keep track of. It's certainly a little more complex. But I do like that it rewards more than just like successful rolls or, I used that skill.
Or just everybody gets these points.
Right.
At the end of a session, you get 10 points, whatever.
Yeah, for as broad as the game is, like I like the fact that it isn't, hey, the only way you get stuff is like killing people.
Right.
Or stealing shit. Right. Like if you want to do that stuff, it's fine. The game doesn't shame you in that at all. But if you are playing, like our corporate, right? Like you're not going to go around shooting a lot of people, but you are going to either be socializing or role playing, The game will award you points for playing into the type of character that you are.
Yeah.
And in a way that's fun for the player.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So I like that too. That it's like,
That's
I'm going to
interesting.
reward what is most fun for you.
And I can see this being different for the different types of characters too. Like, because for the exec, socializer role player makes a lot of sense because you're going to be doing a lot of that. But if you were a solo, you're going to want to probably focus more on warrior and something else, right?
Yeah.
Like for my character, I was thinking, well, I would probably do explorer and role player,
Right.
because that makes total sense for my character's background.
Right.
Yeah, and explorer includes things like solving difficult puzzles, learning about the world, meeting someone new, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're pretty level across the board. So like for the 4 different groups, like the 40 did something out of the ordinary for all 4 of them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it's not uneven where like, oh, well, you killed a bunch of street punks, so you got lots of IP.
Right.
That kind of thing. I think the thing that isn't 100% clear to me, only because I haven't played yet, but I think the way I'm reading it is that everybody will just get the highest one for their session. Like, like, yes, I shot a lot of people, but like I only fought like one really tough person. Cool. Then like you're going to get the like 30.1, not like 8 10.1s because you shot people. Like you shot 8 people. So
gotcha. So that I'm wondering how that works then, like, as far as like the group leveling though too, because there's the potential that like, Ryan has a really good day and I don't, and then is like way ahead of me.
That I think is the actual, so I think there'll be a little bit of disparity.
Yeah, I mean, in a small amount, it's just one of those like, oh, like your
the group
trait is at 6 and I'm at like 4.
Right. The group ones everybody gets at the completion of the job. So everybody's going to like leave the mission with, depending on how big of a success it was, you're all going to leave with that chunk. If it took multiple sessions to get there, everybody's going to kind of earn a little bit different.
Yeah.
A little bit different depending on how your session was. I think in the long run, it probably... Well, I'll know when I play it.
Probably evens out. I also think the point of that like would be to encourage you then to do those things because you don't want to watch everybody else in the group leveling up and you're like, oh, I guess, So it's like, okay, I probably should do more role playing,
I should participate.
Yeah.
And I wonder if these stack too. Like if I did something amazing as an explorer and something out of the ordinary as a role player, do I get, 80 plus 40 points? And then say we complete the mission too, and whatever.
So
and we got 30 points for that.
For the few paragraphs that we have here to draw on, it sounds like it's an or. So if the players didn't finish the mission, they're awarded IP based on either their primary or secondary play style, unless they did something the GM considers stand out from one of the other play styles. So potentially, like if you were acted out of character and let's say that for whatever reason, we get into a gunfight and it's Ryan who just on a series of really amazing rolls saves all of us. As the GM, I could be like, oh no, Ryan, like I'm giving you 40 points from the warrior column this week because like you are completely out of your element, but like you saved everybody.
Yeah.
But then if we complete the mission, we get the mission one, right? Because it sounds like you only get the playstyle ones or whatever if you didn't complete the mission.
Yeah, it's in the in-betweens. So if it's let's say it takes us 3 sessions, we get together, it takes us 3 whole sessions to get through the mission. On the third one, we're all going to get the group one. On the first and second one, we're going to get where we fell on the scale.
So no, Ryan, you cannot min-max it to get 800 points on
all right,
mission.
I did my really cool social thing, so I'm just going to stop role-playing for the rest of the session. Good luck, guys.
Yeah.
Bye.
Turn off my brain.
So then the mission improvement points that you receive, is that on a larger scale than the points that you kind of get as the trickle?
So yeah, those So those, like, you're going to pick up probably, like, unless something went wrong, you're probably going to pick up 40 or more as a group. And they, like they say, like at 40, it's group accomplished most of the mission. Group accomplished most of the mission goals well, show strong cooperative skills. Like at 60, group's mission was a strong success, accomplishing all of the mission goals set forth with several stellar moments in the adventure. That kind of thing.
So it's the same scale, but you're probably going to walk away with 40 unless something went horribly wrong, where it would be entirely possible for me as an individual to walk away from a session with like 10. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's an interesting system for getting the points. I don't know if I've seen a game that did it this way before.
Yeah, I don't recall one that does it exactly like this. It reminds me a little bit of things like in some PBTA games, you get you'll have at the start of the game, a player will pick a stat and a GM will pick a stat. And then you get experience points if you use those stats in the game, i.e. you trigger the moves that use those stats.
Yeah.
So it kind of calls out like, hey, I would like you to be like that. I'm actually going to talk to my group tonight about this. Like, do you guys really want to, the group one's easy. I'm fine with the group XP, but like, do you guys want to do the other one for the in-betweens? My guess is they're pretty good to go. They'll be like, sure, we'll do it.
Yeah.
Or at least they'll want to for a bunch of sessions and then decide.
No thanks.
If they like it or not.
Yeah, it does feel like a lot as a new player to like be like, okay, you can advance this way or this way or this way. Like it feels like as you're explaining it, I'm like, thinking about it more. I'm like, oh, okay, it makes sense. But like it does feel like a lot of like pieces.
A little bit.
Yeah. It's interesting.
The's a lot of pieces for this game.
That is a quality of this game.
Bits.
It does have a lot of fiddly bits.
Like Cyberpunk, there's a lot of different combinations of things that you can do to make your experience better.
Yeah.
Or worse.
Or worse. Yep. Oh, amazing. And then for leveling up, it feels like it's very arbitrary of where you put your points. It's not based on what you've been doing. It's just you get points based on what you've been doing, right?
Yeah, they don't actually limit you to be like, you can only spend these on the skills you used. I think it just assumes that like, hey, you're getting better and, you know, maybe your off time you did other stuff.
Look, I watched a bunch of YouTube videos. So
on sailing.
Got this.
On sailing, yeah.
Yep.
Sorry,
Exactly.
pilot sea vehicle.
Pilot sea vehicle, yep. Yeah.
Look, I got super wealthy, so now I know how to pilot a sea vehicle.
Exactly.
I bought a yacht. So.
And it's Cyberpunk. You just insert a chip into your brain, you're good to go.
Exactly. I downloaded the instructions.
Yeah, it's fine.
I mean, that is the thing that people don't talk about is with the correct hardware, you can just buy skills up to a certain point.
Right.
Oh, that's amazing. And one thing I see that is missing is upping your stats.
I don't think
through leveling up.
I don't think you do.
Yeah.
Can you get that through like can you buy quote unquote upgrades to stats through like Cyberware and stuff like that?
I think there's some Cyberware that might like help you with that. And then of course, because there'll always be more Cyberware books.
Yeah. I'm very curious on how to improve my empathy is the thing.
Well, not with more cyber gear because that'll just kill it.
Certainly. Yeah.
I know. Right?
Nope. That is
therapy.
You can raise your humanity through therapy. So if you have like, for instance, loaded up on Cyberware and now your empathy is like at a cool 3 and you're a little worried about that.
If you're Ryan.
Yeah. Yes, you can. Standard humanity loss. I'm just looking in the rules right here. 1 week of intensive psychotherapy combining stress and anger management, counseling, hypnosis, a bunch of others. About 500 euro bucks, so not cheap. Patient regains 2d6 of their lost humanity, and humanity cannot be fully regained without removal of cyberware. So each piece of cyberware decreases your maximum humanity by 2. So like you can never like go all the way back up, but like you can offset. You can offset like some of your loss. Like if you'd like to have a 4 empathy again, like you can work your way back up.
Oh, interesting.
And then it gets more expensive if you've put what's called Borgware, like the more serious cybernetics, like the really inhuman stuff. If you've done that, then there's another level of therapy that's harder, but will try to also offset you.
Interesting.
So yes, that is the one stat I think that you can it's it's funny. It says humanity, but your empathy goes your empathy is always what is it? A 10th of your humanity divided by 10. So
that's interesting. Well, I think we pretty much covered everything.
It's true.
Yeah. Phil, Senda, thank you both so much for joining us and going through this with us. This was a ton of fun learning about this game.
It really was.
Yeah.
I enjoyed this.
Thank
a lot.
you for having us.
Play it.
Yeah, we should play this, just like this version, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Enemy
Absolutely.
record labels, Mortal Kombat.
Yeah. Yep. Mortal holographic combat over the stage. Well, can you remind everybody where they can find you online and other sorts of things you have going on?
Well, you can find both of us on Panda's Talking Games, which you can find on whatever podcatcher you like to listen to podcasts on, or via direct feed from the Misdirected Mark website, which is misdirectedmark.com. And boy, you can still find us on Twitter too. I don't know. Social media is just a wild place at the moment. So you can still find us on Twitter at Pandas Talk Games. And I'm personally at Idella Mifflin. You can also find me on TikTok by the same name, and also on Dice.camp on Mastodon, same name. If you can spell it, you can find me. What else? And then you can find stuff that I write at Gnome Stew, and you can actually also find just a couple of short little freebie games on Itch if you are into short, weird little games that I have written. Oh yeah, but you can also find like real games. I guess I've done some real stuff too. Yeah, but if you're into magical girls, I don't know. I feel like I'm really rambling in this closing because I'm trying to
covered Love and Justice on this show.
You
have? How did I miss? I must have known this and then forgotten it, but now I get to experience the joy of knowing it all over again.
Yeah. Series 19. Check it out.
Go back and listen to it.
Yeah.
How did I miss that, or
great.
how did I forget it? I think I must have forgotten.
It was
a long
years
time
ago.
Yeah.
I feel like I knew it, listened to it, and forgot about it, and now I'm going to go rediscover it again.
Yeah, so that's out there.
There you go. It was fun.
Phil, what about you?
You can find me in the same places that Senda said on Twitter and all of that stuff. You can find stuff that I've made on Drive-Thru RPG under either Encoded Designs or Engine Publishing.
Awesome.
Look how succinct he is. He's also
great.
on another podcast called Misdirected Mark.
Yeah.
I said that earlier.
Thank you again, both of you, for sitting down with us. And thank you to everyone for tuning in.
Call to action.
Yeah, like that. I feel like despite going into this episode not remembering anything that we did in the previous episodes.
Yeah.
It turned out really great.
It did. No.
I was like reading straight from my character sheet when we got to that opening of like, discuss your character. I was like, I wrote down some numbers. I think I made a character, right?
You did.
Right?
You absolutely did. And it was, it's funny because like all of our characters integrated so well with one another. Like, and then like the random background roles for the life path were just like, oh, I happen to be in the entertainment industry as like a manager or something. And like, oh, well, I happen to be an entertainer. And oh, I happen to be your best friend.
Well, I definitely know
childhood.
that like mine was, I was an exec, so I had like some kind of business thing. And I decided that it was in publicity. So like that wasn't necessarily a role. Like I made the decision that was like, oh, this is what the business is.
Right.
And I always find it funny because we get to these episodes and you're always like, oh, it's crazy how it all worked, isn't it? And it's like, no, That's literally what we do on our show, Ryan.
That's the whole
It's
point,
not crazy how it all worked. We made it work. It's what we do.
We did make it work, but there were a lot of fun coincidences along the way, which I found to be humorous. And like when you're dealing with random tables, it creates those like, you know, opportunities, I guess you could say, right? Of like, we'll link this. This is how you can interpret this because this is what we've been talking about for the last half an hour, right?
Yeah. I think it's funny because you're always like, oh, we rolled such wild stuff. And then like, isn't it funny how we made it? And I'm like, no, because we decided that this was the way we were going to, you know, like you start as like it's like having a bard and you're like, well, they're a singer. And it's like, oh, I have this manager. And so I've decided they manage the singer. Like it isn't really all that random. Like we finessed it to like.
You're pulling back the curtain too far, Amelia. Oh my goodness.
Ryan, everyone just listened to it happen. They heard it all. There's no curtain to pull back. That's the podcast.
I get that. But no, I'm really happy we're able to get Phil and Senda back on the show.
Yes, always
delightful,
fun.
Delightful as always. There might be some more collaborations in the future when we can pin each other down basically for figuring out when to do that.
Yes.
But we talked about a whole bunch of stuff this episode, and goodness gracious, they have such a like great amount of experience between them in the TTRPG industry, and like it's so much fun having them. So
yeah, we got to have a really nice chat here about like GM advice versus player advice, and like making all that come together too, and like. It was fun to talk to people who specifically focus on the thing that we very specifically don't focus on.
Right. It's fun.
It is fun.
There's a lot of overlap there. A lot of potential for some good discussions. So
yeah, special crossover events.
Absolutely. But before we let you go for the day, and before we let you get to thinking about those crossover events, we have some calls to action.
June has been an extraordinarily busy month for us. Also, May was really busy. April and May, because we were doing our Patreon thing.
Drive. Yep.
And then June, we're like, whew, we did it. And then we were like, oh, wait, we still have to make content.
Yep.
Right. We were like so excited about all of the things that we did that we kind of were like, oh, yeah, wait, we have to continue doing.
Right.
It's been a busy month. The rest of the month is also very busy as usual. Will have my end of the month ECT. Also, I have to go see Taylor Swift.
Yep.
Kids are starting summer vacation, so there's lots of rescheduling and rearranging and getting used to new routines and all of that kind of stuff. We've been scrambling, trying to like find dates to get things recorded and scheduled and all that kind of stuff. And it just was not working out in a way that was sustainable for us, I think. I mean, unless we found a way to like record a full month of content this week, it just wasn't going to happen.
Right.
And we thought, no, that is not good for us.
No.
So we are going to take July off, but we are going to recast some of our older episodes. We'll put new openings and closings on them. And we'll be releasing something from our Patreon vaults to the main feed, maybe. We'll see how it goes. We'll still have stuff coming through in your podcast feed for you. And I know I'm still feeling guilty about it because like we did our whole Patreon drive and then we're like, okay, cool. Thanks for the money. Bye. But I promise that's not it. We just both like, it just, you know, I think everybody knows beginning of summer is just crazy. And it's a lot. So we decided like, let's get our ducks in a row and then do it properly. And come back fresh. So July, we'll have some recast stuff out for you. There'll be things in your feed, but we won't have a brand new series out.
Absolutely. But we are also still not done with June yet. We still have another week. And next week, you can be treated to another return of the Character Evolution Cast series.
Hooray!
This time with our first guest on the series since episode 17.
Which, I mean, this is episode 21, I think.
22.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh. I was going to say, like, it didn't seem like, but also because it's been like 3 years. It is a long time.
It's been a long
like,
time.
number-wise, it's not that many episodes, but
It's
like.
been a long time.
It's been a long time.
Exactly. But we're going to be sitting down with a licensed therapist about utilizing TTRPGs in an official therapy setting and the benefits that can come from that. So it really promises to be a great discussion. So we really hope that you can join us for that.
I'm really excited about this one. We've been going back and forth for a while trying to get it planned around life. And I'm so excited that it's finally coming to fruition.
Finally.
And it's obviously a thing that is near and dear to my heart. So I hope everyone will tune in. It'll be fun.
Absolutely.
We have a bajillion amazing people supporting us. And so now it is time for our Patreon thank yous. Let's start, as usual, with Lieutenant and DJG Tigranosaurus. Thank you for supporting our dreams.
Shadim Cabal and Daryl Holiday II, we're happy to have you here with us. Thank you.
Thank you to the Shyest Barbarian and Benjamin Sweeney.
Thanks, Lorcan McInnes and Rob Fletcher. We're glad to have you with us.
Kevin Brown and Tentacle Duck, our deepest thanks.
We're glad to have you here, John Adamus and A3 Sketchpad. Thanks for supporting.
Cole McCallum and Carlos Salazar, you rock. Thank you so much.
Eric S. and Ross Kingston, thank you so much for supporting.
Ian Potmeyer and Grace Bergeron, thank you for believing in us.
Sorigoth and Liam G., thank you so much.
Brian Colm and the Garden GM, we are really happy to have you here with us. Thank you.
We're glad to have you here, Dark Mirror and Tom. Thanks for supporting.
Blue Kryptonite and Danny, thank you for your continued support.
And Nicole Trainer and Liam Murray, thank you as well for your continued support. And thank you to all of our future patrons. Your support means so much to us and will help us make the show even better the more support that we end up getting. Again, join us at patreon.com/charactercreationcast and find out all the cool stuff that we have going on and consider joining up.
If you are unable to support the show financially, there are still plenty of ways you can help us out without spending any money. One of those is by talking about the show either to your friends or folks online or random people you bump into on the streets of New York, because I hear New Yorkers really love when you stop and talk to them about things. You can also follow us on Twitter at CreationCast or join our Discord at discord.charactercreationcast.com. In addition to all of that, you could also leave us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts, Podchaser, Podcast Addict, or also Facebook. Every review helps people find us. It helps us feel good about ourselves, which, is really what all of this is about. Plus, we get to read them on the show right here in our call to action. And yours would be at the top of the pile because we still don't have any.
Still no reviews.
Nope.
But that's it for today's episode. Thank you all so much for joining us here and listening. Until next time, take care of yourselves, everybody. Stay safe, drink some water, and keep making those amazing people. We'll see you next time.
Character Creation Cast is a production of the One Shot Podcast Network and can be found online at www.charactercreationcast.com. Head to the website to get more information on our hosts, this show, and even our press kit. Character Creation Cast can be found on Twitter at CreationCast or on our Discord server at discord.charactercreationcast.com. I'm one of your hosts, Amelia Antrim, and I can be found on Twitter at Ginger Reckoning, or on my other podcast, Garbage of the Five Rings. Our other host, Ryan Bolter, can be found on Twitter at Lord Neptune or online at lordneptune.com. Music for this episode is used with a Creative Commons license or with permission from the podcast it originated from. Further information can be found within the show notes. Our main theme music is Hero Remix by Steve Combs and is used with a Creative Commons license. This podcast is owned by us under Creative Commons. This episode was edited by the absolutely fantastic Ryan Bolter. Further information for the game system used in today's guests can also be found in the show notes. If you'd like to support our show, find us on Patreon. Get access to bonus episodes, extra outtakes, and much, much more at patreon.com/charactercreationcast. Thanks for joining us. And remember, we find the best part of any role-playing game is character creation. So go out there and create some amazing people. We'll see you next time.